as well as the rights of the indigenous communities within Bolivia. This broadcast is not an exercise in journalism but a deliberate attempt to defame and discredit a persecuted community and its diplomatic efforts. By failing to contact Kailasa for comment prior to publication, you have breached fundamental journalistic standards, revealing an intent to prioritize sensationalism over accuracy. This response addresses your allegations systematically, providing detailed evidence, legal precedents, and references to Bolivian, Indian, and international law. Our aim is to correct the record, affirm our commitment to truth and justice, and hold Republic World accountable for its actions. Your video claims to defend indigenous people while simultaneously undermining their autonomy by questioning their right to enter into diplomatic agreements with Kailasa. This stance contradicts the United Nations Declaration on the Right of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP, adopted by the UN General Assembly and endorsed by the Republic of India also. In the Article 3 of UNDRIP, it clearly states that indigenous peoples have the right to self-determination by virtue of the right that they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. In Article 4 of the UNDRIP, it affirms that their right to autonomy and self-governance in matters relating to their internal and local affairs. In Article 36, it grants the indigenous peoples the right to maintain international relations and agreements with other states or entities. So clearly, in international law, the law that is being ratified by countries including the plurinational state of Bolivia and the Republic of India and various other states across the globe, it clearly gives the right to indigenous people to maintain international relations, the right to autonomy, the right to sovereignty, the right to self-determination, which is a fundamental principle in the UNDRIP. By portraying indigenous communities such as incapable of making informed decisions about their partnerships, you violate these very principles and perpetuate a paternalistic narrative inconsistent with international law. In your broadcast, it contravenes several legal and ethical standards governing media in the Republic of India also, including the Press Council of India's norms of journalistic conduct. The Principle 1 requires accuracy and fairness, mandating that journalists verify facts and seek comment from affected parties. Your omission of Kailasa's perspective violates the duty, including the perspective of the indigenous nations in Bolivia. Did you even try to contact the indigenous nations in Bolivia? Because the indigenous nations in Bolivia support Kailasa as indigenous brothers and sisters. They're able to see the clear help, humanitarian services that Kailasa has offered, whether it is the legal, economical, social, in all spheres, how Kailasa has helped the indigenous people. And because you know that the indigenous people support Kailasa, you did not even dare to go and ask them for their statement. In the Cable Television Network Rules of 1994, Rule 61C prohibits content that attacks religious or communities or contains anything defamatory. Your video breaches both provisions because Kailasa is a Hindu nation. Kailasa stands for the Hindutva, Hindu principles, and you have directly attacked the indigenous people, whether it is the indigenous people of Kailasa standing for Hindu rights, and whether it is indigenous people of Bolivia promoting their own culture, their religion. And to both these groups, you have clearly violated the rights of religious expression and freedom of speech. In the Indian Penal Code, IPC Section 499 defines the defamation as any imputation intended to harm reputation is punishable under Section 500 with imprisonment for up to 2 years. Your unsubstantiated claims meet these thresholds. These violations are not isolated errors but are part of a pattern of reckless reporting, as evidenced by your failure to retract prior falsehoods after judicial rulings contradicted your narrative. Let us now look at the various allegations that Republic World has given. The first allegation is Kailasa is a fictitious nation. This assertion is factually and even legally incorrect. Kailasa meets the criteria for statehood under the Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of States, an international treaty widely recognized as customary law. Kailasa, as part of the Montevideo Convention, comprises a global community of Hindu practitioners with a core population residing in its sovereign territories. Kailasa does have a permanent population, and you're invited to even come to Kailasa to see the current population of Kailasa, meet the monks and nuns of Kailasa who are currently living, and you can even take the testimonials for them, as Kailasa has over 110 million e-citizens across the globe and has several thousands of our monks and nuns currently residing in our sovereign territories. So you are welcome to come and meet any of Kailasa's citizens worldwide and take the testimony for being a citizen and standing strong against the defamatory people like you, the anti-indigenous, the racist media like you who are perpetrating and trying to show the false statements and performing lawfare on this already marginalized, persecuted indigenous community. Kailasa does have defined territory. Kailasa possesses the land, sovereign land from various countries and various autonomous and semi-autonomous lands from various countries who have given those lands to Kailasa to continue the humanitarian work that we do, to establish institutions such as Gurukuls, Hindu universities, temples, adhinams, the Hindu courts, where directly Kailasa is benefiting the community around them, and we are directly helping the people. And those countries, unlike you, recognize Kailasa's humanitarian initiatives, where we have served over 2 billion free meals till today. We have served medical care to millions of people around the globe. We have given the free education to millions of people around the globe. So while your media is continuously perpetrating all of these lies, all of these false statements, Kailasa continues to help the communities around the world by providing humanitarian services, by providing the various services that are for the good of the community, including the indigenous nations of Bolivia, where Kailasa has already started its various initiatives, such as providing free food, opening food banks to serve the indigenous population who are already marginalized and who are seeking international support and seek Kailasa's support to help them in various areas across the globe. Kailasa does have its own government. Kailasa operates under a structured administration led by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Sri Nityananda Paramashivam, and Kailasa has its own government, its own ministries, its parliament, and Republic World has no right to comment that Kailasa is a fictitious nation, while they have not even consulted Kailasa before making these false allegations. Kailasa has the capacity to enter into international relations. Kailasa has executed over 100 diplomatic agreements and thousands of diplomatic treaties, agreements with various countries, with various municipalities, with various states, with various kingdoms. And we can give you a list which goes on and on and on of Kailasa's international partners who stand strong with Kailasa even in the face of this persecution that you media, racist anti-indigenous media are perpetrating on Kailasa. These nations, these countries, these municipalities stand strong with Kailasa and have reaffirmed their commitment as international partners and have actually requested Kailasa to continue our services in the various indigenous populations. Indigenous people in Bolivia stand strong with Kailasa even today, even as this racist lawfare attack is going on Kailasa and the indigenous communities. They have reaffirmed their commitment to Kailasa and standing strong in the face of this persecution on them, the indigenous population and Kailasa. The Article 3 of the Montevideo Convention states, the political existence of a state is independent of recognition by other states. Precedents such as Taiwan, Kosovo, which function as sovereign entities without universal recognition, affirm this principle. Kailasa's sovereignty is further rooted in the historical continuity of Hindu kingdoms, recognized under the doctrine of continuity in international law, tracing its lineage to the Chola, Pandya and Vijayanagara dynasties. Your characterization of Kailasa as a fictitious disregards these facts and violates the UNDRIP's recognition of indigenous and self-determination. Even in the UNDRIP, it clearly states, even in the Montevideo Convention, it clearly states that the international relations does not matter. The sovereignty of any state continues as per the principles of self-determination. You have no right to call Kailasa as fictitious, and this is a blatant lie without regarding whether international law, which even states such as the plurinational state of Bolivia or the Republic of India are a signatory to. In your next allegation, you say that Kailasa has been caught cheating indigenous people in Bolivia. This is totally baseless and repeats a pattern of defamation previously disproven. In 2019, the Republic World accused Supreme Court of Hinduism as a charge of kidnapping, and this same allegation has been disproven by the High Court, Honorable High Court of Gujarat on February 14, 2024, and the court found there is no evidence of the kidnapping and there is no evidence of the allegations from the Republic World. Accuses Kailasa that Kailasa has been caught cheating indigenous people in Bolivia. This allegation is completely false and is completely an attack on the sovereignty of Kailasa, autonomy of Kailasa, and the sovereignty and autonomy of the indigenous people of Bolivia. Do you mean to say that the indigenous people do not know their rights? Do you mean to say that they do not know what they're signing? How can you say and undermine the sovereignty and autonomy given to indigenous peoples of Bolivia? There is no evidence of cheating that you have given. Your video repeatedly claims that Kailasa representatives have been caught cheating, yet present zero evidence of any deceptive conduct, fraud or failure to fulfill the obligations, and Kailasa has time and again stood as per the constitution of the plurinational state of Bolivia and even the various international laws such as the UNDRIP, the Montevideo Convention and various other international law that protects the indigenous people, including the ILO Convention of ILO 169, International Labour Organization Convention. Kailasa clearly stands as per international law and has not cheated anyone, leave alone the indigenous people of Bolivia who are our brothers, indigenous brothers and sisters. You have continuously told that the Kailasa has cheated indigenous nations, whereas the agreements between Kailasa and indigenous nations are legitimate diplomatic agreements exercising constitutional rights to self-determination and not cheating in any sense. Your false characterization of legitimate diplomatic relationships as cheating is deliberately defamatory and designed to marginalize our already persecuted Hindu community. Having already orchestrated a vicious persecution campaign against Kailasa at various instances, whether it's 2019, whether it is 2020, 2021, in every single time, directly the Republic World has falsely accused Kailasa of wrongdoings, and Kailasa has stood strong in the face of your racist lawfare. Republic World now emerges from the shadows 5 years later, wielding the same poisonous fabrications. Just as our persecuted Kailasa communities begins rebuilding through international friendships and providing humanitarian services through the indigenous people of Bolivia, now the Republic World, feeling jealous of such powerfulness being shown by Kailasa and by our indigenous brothers and sisters in Bolivia, were signing international cooperation and directly standing by the clauses, by the rights given to us in the Constitution of Bolivia and in the various international law. Now Republic World, out of the jealousy and viciousness that they hold against Kailasa, doing so much of work globally, it is burning in Republic World that how is Kailasa succeeding? How is Kailasa able to establish such strong international partnerships across the world, whether it is in Bolivia, in the remote Amazon rainforest of Bolivia, right up till the various international agreements signed all across the globe. The Republic World is not able to stomach the self-determination and success of Kailasa that is being shown through standing as per the Constitution of Bolivia and international law. Kailasa preserves our indigenous rights, religious freedom, and our fundamental right to exist as per international law and our own self-determination. Republic World returns like a predator to its prey, launching this fresh assault of toxic lies designed to explicitly provoke hatred, inflame violent prejudice, and ultimately facilitate the cultural genocide of our already vulnerable minority indigenous Hindu traditions. This is not journalism, it is a deliberate continuation of a documented campaign to eradicate our own very existence, whether it is the existence of Kailasa, the indigenous Hindu nation, or whether it is the existence of the various indigenous nations who are now surfacing to stand by their own rights in the Constitution of Bolivia, which is given to them in the Constitution of their own country, where they are standing up for their rights, they're standing up for their self-determination, they're standing up for the sovereignty that has already been provided to them, the autonomy that already exists over them, their territories. Now Republic World is directly attacking these already marginalized minority indigenous people in Bolivia. This breathtaking hypocrisy of Republic World of accusing others of cheating cannot go unchallenged given your documented history of deliberate misinformation campaigns against Kailasa. In November 2019, Republic World conducted a multi-day defamation campaign with hours and hours of false allegations of kidnapping against the SPH, whereas just last year, the Honorable High Court of Gujarat directly quashed all such allegations, rendering the Supreme Court of Hinduism completely innocent as the laws of international law and even the law of the Republic of India. These allegations were so false that even YouTube and our international partners who value human rights, who value journalistic ethics, who value the basic right to self-determination, such as YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, X, and various platforms, have taken down and geo-blocking over such 120 such defamation videos in 2023, including Republic World's broadcasts. This is a direct fact and testimony that directly you are not revealing to your viewers that the various social media platforms have actually recognized your hypocrisy, have recognized your lies, have recognized your anti-indigenous racist campaign against Kailasa and our indigenous brothers and sisters. And most damningly, on February 2024, the Honorable High Court of Gujarat gave the final order completely exonerating the Supreme Court of Hinduism and the people of Kailasa this very same allegations you promoted. Rather than issuing apology or correction after this judicial exoneration, Republic World simply made these defamatory videos private, like a coward, attacking admission of wrongdoing without the integrity to acknowledge it publicly. This shows how Republic World is just giving a systematic persecution and defamation against Kailasa and cowardly tries to cover its footprint, cover its human rights violation, cover its persecution against Kailasa, a Hindu nation, Kailasa, which is a indigenous, already marginalized, indigenous persecuted community. Republic World shocking involvement in spreading pornographic, deepfake videos, defamed the Supreme Court of Hinduism, conduct so bad that it prompted YouTube's intervention, demolishes any pretense of journalistic credibility or moral authority to make accusations against others. The real cheats in this situation are those who deliberately mislead the public through fabricated allegations, manipulations, footage which are morphed by AI, or deepfake videos, and suppression of judicial findings, the behaviors Republic World has repeatedly demonstrated. And all our legal agreements with the indigenous nations are completely transparent. This has been notarized by the Ministry of Justice of Bolivia, the various organs of the Ministry of Justice of Bolivia. This has been protocolized, which is a step to make it public. So any of us, anyone who wants to have these agreements, it is completely public. Even you can go to Bolivia and take these agreements and can see for yourself that directly whether it is the judicial system of Bolivia, whether it is including these agreements have been notarized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of International Affairs of Bolivia, directly giving a testimony that none of these agreements are false, none of these agreements are against international law, against the Constitution of Bolivia and the various rights given to indigenous nations in Bolivia. All these agreements include the explicit provision also, if you had the actual chance, if you had the actual intention to perpetrate the truth instead of spreading false lies, if you had the actual intention to be an ethical media house, if you had such normal journalistic ethics, you would actually gone and seen what is given in the agreements. In the agreements, it clearly states that the various land lease will be effectuated after ratification by the competent authorities, whether it is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bolivia or the State of Bolivia, ensuring full compliance with Bolivian law number 465 and ILO Convention 169. This crucial points in the agreement, which you deliberately, cunningly omitted from your reporting, demonstrates our absolute commitment to legal transparency and respect for governmental approval processes. These agreements were properly notarized and protocolized, and even apostilled in Bolivia according to international law and according to Bolivian law and Bolivian constitution. Your characterization of these transparent, legally documented agreements as cheating demonstrates actual malice, the legal standard for defamation of public figures. And coming into the rights of indigenous people in Bolivia, the international law explicitly guarantees indigenous people have the right to self-determination and to maintain their institutions. I want the publishers and the journalists of Republic TV to once actually go to Google and see the various international law and self-determination rights of Bolivia before making such defamatory and useless, baseless statements such as Kailasa cheats just to gain a TRP in your media firm. Indigenous nations have internationally recognized rights to enter into international agreements that support cultural preservation, environmental protection, and sustainable development. These are rights given to the indigenous people, whether it is in the various international law, whether it is in the ILO convention, whether it is in the constitution of Bolivia. It gives the rights to indigenous nations to enter into international agreements with international partners for the preservation of their environment, for cultural preservation, cultural exchange, and sustainable development, which Kailasa is doing and working with the indigenous nations of Bolivia. By characterizing these legitimate exercises of internationally recognized rights as cheating, Republic World directly undermines the indigenous sovereignty and perpetrates the colonial control mechanisms. Be very clear, this is not an attack on Kailasa. Kailasa has already a sovereign status which you cannot even comment on. This is an attack that you are doing on the already marginalized indigenous people of Bolivia. Rather than saying that Kailasa is cheating, actually you should recognize yourselves as undermining the sovereignty, undermining the autonomy of these indigenous nations in Bolivia. This position is not merely factually incorrect, but represents a fundamental assault on the indigenous rights guaranteed by international law and the various other laws which are given, the rights that are being given to the indigenous nations in Bolivia. The pattern of deliberate defamation. Republic World has demonstrated a persistent pattern of targeted defamation against Kailasa and the Supreme Point of Hinduism that extends far beyond journalistic error or oversight. While other media organizations reported the formal legal exonerations of the Supreme Point of Hinduism and Kailasa, have reported the actual media who focuses on perpetrating the legal recognitions that focus on actual ethical journalism, have actually recognized that Kailasa, as per international law, the indigenous nations, as per their own country's law, the constitution of the plurinational state of Bolivia, have the right to enter into international relations. And other medias have acknowledged, unlike you, the anti-indigenous racist media such as the Republic World, who are deliberately suppressing this critical information and continuing their malpractice of non-ethical journalism. Not a single minute of coverage was dedicated to the exoneration of the Supreme Point of Hinduism by the Honorable High Court of Gujarat, exonerating the Supreme Point of Hinduism that any of the accusations of kidnapping or any other accusations are completely false, which is delicately pronounced by the courts of the Gujarat Honorable High Court in the Republic of India. This established pattern of deliberate suppression of exonerating evidence while amplifying unverified defamatory claims meets the highest legal standard or actual malice in defamation proceedings. Republic World's current allegations of cheating represent not isolated error but the continuation of a documented campaign of targeted defamation for which you have already faced platform sanctions, whether it is YouTube, whether it is Facebook. All of these platforms have removed, have geo-blocked your videos, and you are such a coward that you have not even recognized, come to the light that you have done something wrong. Your media house is completely anti-indigenous, anti-Hindu, and continuously perpetrating the racist media lawfare against Kailasa and against our indigenous brothers and sisters of Bolivia. 3. That the agreements give Kailasa all rights and resources within the land. The indigenous nations have the sovereign rights. The Constitution of Bolivia gives the indigenous nations of Bolivia complete sovereignty, complete autonomy over the lands whether it is for the preservation of their land, whether it is for promoting their cultural traditions, whether it is for the actual exercise of maintaining treaties and relationships with various international partners or agreements. It directly gives all rights for the indigenous people to enter into international relations. Kailasa does not do any mining, any extraction. The fundamental principles of Kailasa is on ahimsa, that is the non-violence. The principle of non-violence is given in the Vedas and Agamas, which is the constitution of Kailasa. If you have any small sense of ethical journalism, go see the Vedas and Agamas. Go open up the Vedas and Agamas and see the principles that are given in the Vedas and Agamas, which are the direct constitution of Kailasa. Kailasa operates on the Vedas and Agamas as its constitution, and the Manu Dharma Shastra, which is our jurisprudence, and it is based on these principles. It is based on these fundamental principles, the Hindu principles of ahimsa, which Kailasa operates, which Kailasa works to establish these friendships of uniting the indigenous nations across the globe. Kailasa, as per this constitution of Kailasa, the Vedas and Agamas, for us, the Bhuma Devi, the Mother Earth is sacred, and as per the constitution of Kailasa, we do not do any mining, extraction, or in any way exploit the territories, the sacred territories of the indigenous people. Whether it is in their language, they call the indigenous territories as they call Mother Earth as Pachamama, or whether it is even the goddess in the Tamil culture, which is Pachayamma. All our basic roots of indigenous people and Kailasa are directly one and the same. We hold the same principles which are recognized by the indigenous people. Go and take a testimony from any indigenous people that Kailasa signed with. They will tell you the amount of love, the amount of respect, the overwhelming gratitude that they have to Kailasa to come to recognize their nation, to give these humanitarian services to their nation. But unlike your racist, anti-indigenous media, if you took some effort to even take the testimonies of these indigenous nations, they will tell you that it is as per the international law, as per Bolivian law. They have not done anything wrong. They have not done anything that has gone against their constitution. They have not done anything that goes against the international rights and provisions that give them these various rights. And these partnerships that we have had with the indigenous nations are for the environmental conservation of their Amazon territories. Is directly for protecting their Amazon territories, not exploitation like all of you have in your mind. Because in your mind, you only think of exploiting people. In your mind, you only think of perpetrating the anti-indigenous, anti-Hindu, the racist lawfare that you are doing. The indigenous nations have the right and authority to enter into international relations as per their own constitution. So if you had any small thread of ethical journalism, go read the international conventions, go read the Montevideo Convention, go read the constitution of the plurinational state of Bolivia. It will clearly inform you that these agreements are completely right. The indigenous people have the authority, and Kailasa has the authority to enter into international relations. In the next allegation, you say that Kailasa's agreements are illegal against Bolivian law. Even the Bolivian government has never said that these agreements are illegal under Bolivian law. This claim fundamentally misrepresents both Bolivian constitutional law and international law regarding indigenous rights. This is not an attack on Kailasa that you are doing, but it is an attack on the constitution of Bolivia. This is an attack on the international law, the various international law conventions such as the UNDRIP, whether it's the Montevideo Convention. Your attack is not on Kailasa, but your attack is on these international law, undermining the constitution of Bolivia, undermining the international law which even the Republic of India is a signatory of. Bolivian constitution explicitly recognizes and protects indigenous people, the right to self-governance and international relations. In the Article 30, paragraph 2, clause 4 of the Bolivian constitution guarantees the indigenous peoples the right to self-determination and territoriality. In Article 30, it ensures the right to maintain their own institutions. In Article 30, again, it explicitly protects the indigenous people's collective intellectual property of their knowledge, sciences, and learning. In the Article 4, it guarantees freedom of religious and spiritual beliefs in accordance with indigenous worldviews. In Article 98 of the Bolivian Constitution, it affirms that the state assumes cultural diversity as the essential basis of the plurinational communitarian state. These constitution provisions, and there are so many more articles in the Bolivian Constitution which gives the rights to indigenous people, which recognizes their right. Unlike your racist anti-indigenous propaganda, the Constitution of Bolivia actually recognizes the rights and gives these rights to the indigenous people. So be very clear, all of these statements are not an attack on Kailasa, rather it is an attack on the Bolivian Constitution itself. Republic World has no rights to attack Kailasa, let alone the Constitution of the plurinational state of Bolivia. So be very clear, I will not be surprised tomorrow if even the Bolivian government condemns your accusations on the Bolivian Constitution, condemns your racist, anti-indigenous media, unethical journalism against the indigenous people of Bolivia. This explicit compliance with Bolivian law and Kailasa agreements, our agreements with indigenous nations, include the explicit clause that mentions that all these agreements, all the lease, whether it is the lease payments, whether it is the various cultural exchanges, the various humanitarian aid that we provide to these indigenous nations, will be effectuated after ratification of this treaty by competent authorities. That means that Kailasa upholds the Constitution of Bolivia, upholds the supremacy of the government of Bolivia included, that Kailasa's agreements are in full compliance with the Bolivian Constitution. Just imagine if Kailasa was trying to cheat the indigenous nations, if Kailasa was trying to do a backdoor approach, why would we even put that clause in the treaty? Why would Kailasa's agreement even include the clause that this has to go through the ratification of the government of Bolivia, has to go through the ratification of the competent authorities of Bolivia? And if these agreements are illegal, as you are stating, why will the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bolivia apostille our treaty? Why will the arms of the Ministry of Justice of Bolivia notarize and protocolize these treaties? Just think and look back for a second, that if at all that we wanted to do some shady back deal approach, if Kailasa wanted to do such kind of illegal agreements, why would we get this treaty notarized? Why will we get this treaty protocolized? Why will we get this treaty apostilled as per the various international law? Tell me, Republic World, did you even do such research on the treaties of Bolivia? Did you even consult Kailasa's authorities before making such a racist, lawfare persecution against Kailasa? Did you even come to us? Did you even hear our statement? But now here we are making our statement clear. Here we are telling the truth of these treaties, telling the truth of the relationship that Kailasa has with these indigenous nations. Our agreements with indigenous nations includes these specific clauses. Our agreements of the treaties that we have, the agreements that we have with the indigenous nations include every single clause of the Bolivian Constitution references to the rights of the Bolivian people. Did you even take a moment to go through? Did you even try to get your hands on these agreements? I'm sure you might have seen. These agreements are totally as per the Constitution, valid as per the Constitution of Bolivia, the various international laws that protect the rights of indigenous people. So if you had a strand of ethical journalism, you would actually gone and seen what the agreements say. You would have gone and read the clauses of the agreements, which completely debunks your racist lawfare against Kailasa, calling these agreements as illegal. The various provisions ensure the full compliance with Bolivian law number 465 and the ILO Convention of 169, which clearly states that the indigenous people have the rights to enter into international relations. These are conservation partnerships and not territorial claims. Clearly, your anti-indigenous, racist publications and your racist lawfare on Kailasa state that these agreements are Kailasa is claiming these territories. Kailasa is not claiming any of the territories of the indigenous people of Bolivia. Kailasa recognizes their self-determination. Kailasa recognizes their right to enter, the right over their territories, and Kailasa is only given a lease for the conservation, the environmental protection of these sacred Amazonian territories. Kailasa has given them agreement of conservation partnership, not the exploitation, like how your dirty minds would think that Kailasa wants to exploit these indigenous nations. As indigenous people ourselves, Kailasa holds a high regard. Kailasa has united over 100 indigenous nations across the globe. Kailasa is a founder of the United Ancient Nations, which is an intergovernmental organization for the protection of indigenous people. When Kailasa stands so much for the rights of indigenous people, when Kailasa stands as a parent, a mother and father, a brother and sister of these indigenous people, why do you think that we would even go and try to exploit their territories, try to claim their territories? Kailasa already has its sovereign land. Kailasa has its various sovereign lands, autonomous and semi-autonomous lands across the globe. And we do not even need territory from these indigenous people. But out of our compassion, out of our humanitarian aid, out of our basic need to help our brothers and sisters, indigenous brothers and sisters of Bolivia, Kailasa signed these agreements in good faith and to show our solidarity and support with these indigenous nations, telling them that, showing the rights that they have, standing by the rights that they have as per the Bolivian constitution, as per the international law. And unlike you anti-indigenous media who try to undermine their sovereignty, who try to undermine their autonomy, who try to undermine the basic rights that the indigenous people have, Kailasa has actually gone and helped these indigenous people. Kailasa has given humanitarian aid to these indigenous people. Kailasa has signed partnership agreements to conserve their territories, to conserve the Amazonian territories which they need help in conserving. All these indigenous people have appreciated and even now are standing in solidarity with Kailasa. Even now, if you go ask the presidents of any of the indigenous nations that have signed with Kailasa, they themselves will tell you that your media is just doing an attack on them. Because of your such media claims that they are getting death threats. Because of your media, they are getting abused. They are getting further marginalized. And because of your anti-indigenous racist publications, it is not an attack just on Kailasa that you are doing. Your attack is on the sovereignty, is on the autonomy of such indigenous people. Warfare that Republic World is trying to perpetrate is Kailasa and Bolivia's indigenous communities have so much of cultural similarity. Many indigenous Bolivian communities practice spiritual traditions that include elements of cosmic harmony, respect for nature, and recognitions of divine manifestations, concepts that are entirely compatible with Hindu spiritual perspectives. The allegation that indigenous communities cannot engage with other spiritual traditions it in itself is a colonialist perspective that denies their agency, that denies their indigenous communities the sovereignty to their culture, the autonomy that is given, the right that is being given by the Constitution of Bolivia to practice their own culture. It denies this fundamental right that has been given to them. Kailasa and the Supreme Point of Hinduism have so much of cultural similarities. Like I mentioned before, they call the Mother Earth Pachamama, we call the Mother Earth Pachayamma. And like this, there are thousands of similarities between Kailasa and the indigenous nations of Bolivia because we are all indigenous. We stem from the same principles. Unlike you modern colonialists, unlike your colonialist minds, Kailasa and the indigenous nations have so much in common which have been recognized by the indigenous people. That is why the indigenous people welcomed Kailasa with open arms. Kailasa had an overwhelming support from the indigenous people when we went to them, when we proposed the various humanitarian services, when we started giving these various humanitarian services. The indigenous people were so thankful to Kailasa out of so much of gratitude that they came and they were so happy to sign. In fact, they were enthusiastic of signing the treaties, the agreements with Kailasa that conserve their lands, that promotes their indigenous culture, that stands up for the rights of the indigenous rights that they have in the Bolivian constitution and international law. So unlike what your racist media, what your anti-indigenous media is trying to perpetrate, the indigenous people, instead of being cheated by Kailasa, were actually praising Kailasa for the amount of work that Kailasa has done to unite the ancient nations across the globe. The amount of work that Kailasa has done, as per the founder of the intergovernmental organization, the United Ancient Nations, Kailasa has already united 100 plus indigenous nations across the globe, from the indigenous people of New Zealand, the Maori people, all the way until the Inuit people of Canada. Kailasa works towards uniting the various indigenous nations, whether it is the indigenous nations in South America, whether it is the Inuit people in Alaska and in Canada, whether it is the indigenous people of Europe, whether it is the indigenous people and kingdoms of Africa, whether it is the indigenous people, the Maori people of New Zealand and Oceania. Kailasa in every corner of the globe has already signed diplomatic treaties, has already signed, as per Kailasa's own foreign policy, to unite the ancient nations of the world. And who is Republic TV to question or even interfere in the foreign policy of Kailasa? Who is Republic TV to even comment on the foreign policy of Kailasa? The Republic TV, who is Republic TV to call Kailasa a fictitious nation, undermining the principle of self-determination of Kailasa? Who is Republic TV, and what rights does Republic TV have against the journalistic laws of the Republic of India, against the laws, the international law, against the constitution of the plurinational state of Bolivia and the various other countries across the globe who are signatories to these international law? Who is Republic TV to question the rights of the indigenous people? Who is Republic TV to undermine the sovereignty and autonomy of the indigenous people of Bolivia? The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, as part of Kailasa and the sovereign order of Kailasa's Nityananda, the monks and nuns of Kailasa have served as pioneers of uniting these ancient nations, and our work has been focused on preserving these endangered knowledge systems, the indigenous knowledge, preserving and promoting the indigenous knowledge system, whether it is their culture, whether it is their language, whether it is our culture, our language, our traditions. Kailasa has only worked towards preserving these ancient knowledge, the indigenous knowledge. Kailasa, under the guidance of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, has extended our humanitarian grants to more than 100 indigenous nations worldwide, supporting the critical initiatives including environmental sustainability, forest conservation, poverty alleviation, women and child empowerment, free education, healthcare access, and food security programs, and I can keep naming millions of other initiatives that we have done which completely contradict and debunk the false accusations of cheating the indigenous nations. Kailasa has gone and approached the indigenous nations of Bolivia and signed agreements with indigenous nations of Bolivia purely to go to them and stand in solidarity for their rights, for their self-determination, for their autonomy. And we are just a channel through which we are uniting the indigenous nations of the world to stand up against the persecution and discrimination that anti-indigenous lawfare media houses like you, Republic World, that are doing to us, that are completely undermining our rights, undermining the various international law, the various constitutions of all of our countries. You are directly, it is not just a systematic lawfare on Kailasa, but it is a direct attack on the constitution of Bolivia. It is a direct attack on the indigenous people of Bolivia. These contributions that we are given to the indigenous people represent our unwavering commitment to indigenous welfare and sustainable development, whether it is providing free food, providing free medical access, providing free education to these indigenous communities, something that does not even cross your mind because on a daily basis you only work to perpetrate the anti-indigenous and do not support the indigenous people, try to marginalize the indigenous people and persecute the indigenous people. So unlike people like you who are directly attacking our indigenous brothers and sisters in Bolivia, Kailasa actually works towards preserving, protecting and preserving the rights of the indigenous people of Bolivia, the indigenous people of the world. So unlike your exploitative colonial relationships, these agreements that Kailasa has is based on humanitarian partnership, is based on the fundamental rights of indigenous people, are dedicated to strengthen the indigenous sovereignty while preserving both our cultures, our cultural heritage, our language, our traditions, and even preserving the lands, the forests, the flora and fauna of all of these nations. Unlike you, Kailasa is actually doing good work around the world. Kailasa is working to hold up the rights of these indigenous people across the globe. And clearly, this is a direct statement, this is a direct warning to Republic World, our demand for action of Republic World, that various medias have already retracted their anti-indigenous, anti-Hindu, racist lawfare. We demand a full retraction of your video, a public apology to both the indigenous people of Kailasa, the United States of Kailasa, and the indigenous people of Bolivia. We demand a public apology on all of your platforms. We demand a broadcast of this response in its entirety. Kailasa has stood for over 10,000 years and will continue standing long after today's headlines are forgotten. The question is whether your media house will be remembered for perpetrating colonial narratives or having the integrity to correct them. We demand the Republic World does not interfere in Kailasa's self-determination, does not undermine the Constitution of Bolivia, does not undermine the international laws and conventions, does not undermine and even interfere in the foreign policy of Kailasa. Republic World has no rights to undermine all of these institutions, all of these laws, and we clearly want to tell the international community, the world is watching the persecution that the Republic World is committing. The world is watching the journalistic abuse, the journalistic lawfare that the Republic World is doing against Kailasa and against the indigenous people of Bolivia. And we clearly stand for truth, and Kailasa will continue to flourish as a mother and father, as a sister and brother of our indigenous people across the globe, providing our services and continuing Kailasa's foreign policy, which is focused on the direct aid to the indigenous communities, that are focused on preserving the environment, that is focused on enriching and empowering the indigenous communities. So with this is a direct statement, this is a direct warning for Republic World for their anti-indigenous, anti-Hindu, racist lawfare that they are perpetrating against our already marginalized indigenous communities. Thank you, Nityanandam.